Okay, hi there. I'm Breeze, and I'm really honored to be involved with the project. It's been a lot of fun, especially to meet a lot of new people that I may possibly have not met before. It was really great. So, a little bit about my background. Um, well, first of all, let's go with the name, because the name Breeze is one that I've given myself. My full name is an elongated name. I won't go into that, but I've given myself the name Breeze because a lot of other artists that I've met, musicians and visual artists, which is my background, they told me that I needed something else to set me aside from all the other people who have the name that is so much that mine is. The same, maybe there are hundreds of me around the world. So Breeze, because when I was a young, tiny little guy, I lived in Ohio. That's where I'm from originally, Columbus, Ohio. It's the capital of the state. And there we have 4 distinct seasons. So with those seasons, and especially there because it's very flat land, a lot of forests, but very flat. And so in the seasons, when we have all the winds, I was really intrigued by these sounds of the wind because it's very different. It's not just the same. And so when I would hear these sounds, I actually tried to create the sounds on my own. And so I actually taught myself how to And so, as these other artists that I've known told me, you have to find someone with a name that fits you better so that you can be isolated on your own. So I chose the name Breeze. And what I'm doing, I found out later in life as I studied ethnomusicology, I found out that what I'm actually doing is the same as overtone singing, which they do in Tibet, and the Tubans also do overtone singing. And it's where they're able to reshape their mouth and create, in some cases, 3 different notes at the same time, or what appears to be 3, 2 distinct ones, but then the third one comes in as an overtone. And what I do though is I don't use my vocal cords. I simply push the air, but I'm using the same shapes with my mouth, which is changing the shape of the tongue and then the opening of the mouth. So anyway, enough about that, and check out on your own overtone singing and you'll know what I mean. I won't go into that now. But okay, so my background is first from sound. That was an example, but when I was a child, actually before I could even speak, I can remember being in the baby bed and these large human beings looking down on me and making sounds from their mouths. And so, I mean, in my own infancy of trying to rationalize this, I could hear these sounds, but of course they meant nothing to me because I didn't know how to form sounds on my own. But I can remember that. And I've been told that not many people remember those things from that far back. So sounds were always important to me. And then as time went on, shapes became really interesting to me. Through my life, I've always gone through and done creativity and creations through the visual arts and through the audio, the sound arts. So my journey took me after drawing and working with shapes to try to look at shapes of things, and my search for an instrument. When I discovered the drum set, to me it looked like a sculpture. And it was unusual to me also because of the size and because it was a combinations of the wooden drums and also the metallic cymbals. So I'm so grateful that I chose that instrument, aside from the fact that transporting it is quite an undertaking. But I'm glad that I chose that instrument because as time has gone on, those instruments have been able to be designed personally. So with the machining background that I also, as I went on, along in life, I'm able to shape the design of the drum set or the various drum setups that I use. Because of the new technology, I can change things and I can make it visually interesting for me and for the audience. So for me, performing becomes another extension in that I have a choice of so many different instruments that I can make it interesting for sound and for the visual of what it looks like from not only from me from behind the kit, but also from in front. So then as I studied drum set and moved eventually across the world, I came to California in the 70s and lived out here, but not here, actually in more than Southern California near the beach. And there I started meeting people, more internationally connected people. And at that point I met a Danish woman, and we were married, and we didn't stay long after we were married. We stayed about maybe a year and a half, and we moved then to Denmark. And in Denmark, which Danish is my second language, I met people even more in depth from all over the world. And I met percussionists who opened up instrumentation to me in a way that I had never realized, that the tambourine has all these relatives, the frame drums, the single membrane drums that have thin shells that are easy to hold, that they're played in such different ways. So I met people from Morocco and from Cairo and all over Turkey. So finding these other ways to express myself in percussion with my hands developed another extension of what I do and what is exciting for me, creativity. Just took on a whole new meaning for me. Then, as I said, I went on to study further in ethnomusicology and studied the cultures from around the world and instruments from all over Africa and India, and of course the connections then, for example, the original people from Angola, as they came across, not on their own will, but they were taken. And then that connection to Brazil with the instrument, the berimbau, and how it was a different shape from Angola, but it became the berimbau that we know today. And that's exciting for me because it's connected to a region. And because of the type of trees that they have in Brazil, it took this new shape and a whole new meaning, of course, too. The connection with capoeira, and then even deeper with candomblé and how that relates to the earth and herbs and life. So I have to then go back and just to say that along this way, I'm still doing my visual work, my visual arts. And in fact, if you want to turn that camera around slightly, you can see two of my sculptures that are over here. They're two pieces that I've done that are combinations of wood and stone. Most of my creative sculptures have been in metal, but as I went on to study other things like woodworking, these two that you're looking at right now, those two pieces they're small towers. That the larger one is it's a type of wood that's called purple heart, which is wood it's indigenous to Colombia and parts of Brazil also. And then the smaller one is mahogany. And the idea with those was to do an installation where I was going to have 20 or 30 of those in all different types of wood, different types of stones, and still maintain that same sort of shape as a little tower. But so there are those. As we go down into the studio, I can show you an instrument that I created, which happened from making sound sculptures. And sound sculptures were a deeper connection for me because even though I chose the drum set, it still didn't satisfy what I heard in my head, because as a kid, as a child, I heard sounds in my head that I couldn't find the instrument that would create those sounds. So in metal, and as I became a metal worker, I started hearing things that sounded much more like what I knew of a sound in my head. And I remember that as I was commissioned to do these sculptures, sound sculptures are ones that I create, were ones that worked outside. They worked with the elements, and in Ohio at the time, those elements were activating the sculptures. So my third sculpture that I was creating was one that would spin, and it had several sets of chimes, and I designed it for a woman who plays violin. So a lot of the parts, the components of this sculpture could be activated with a violin bow. And it was 2 days before I finished the sculpture, I had a dream, and in this dream I had this instrument that I was playing. It was a metal instrument, and I was playing that instrument with a violin bow and with mallets. And so it was a wonderful dream that I created this music in the dream, and woke up and went off to finish the sculpture. And then on this day that I did finish the sculpture, I am looking around and I'm about to clean up to finish the day. And I see these parts and I'm thinking, these look a lot like the parts from the sculpture or the instrument that I saw in my dream. So I turned back on the welder. I started welding these bits and pieces together, and amazingly enough, the instrument sounds much like it did in the dream. And it's not like any other instrument. The only thing that would be closest related to the instrument would be the saw. And if any of you have ever heard the saw, which is basically a real saw, they've gone on to make other saws that are much easier and don't have the teeth. But the saw is used, it's bent by holding the handle of the saw under the leg, and then the end is bent in different positions and played with the violin bow. So you'll see my instrument as we go down into the studio. And the interesting thing about that connection with the saw is my father played the saw. He played also other instruments as well, but when I had the wonderful opportunity to meet and become friends with a composer from Brazil, Moacir Santos, and in his last years before he passed, I remember having a whole day that I spent with him, and I brought my instrument, the one that I'm referring to, and that was the first thing he said when I played it. He said, "Oh, the saw, it's like the saw." So that was a great connection with Moacir. And then he went on to tell me wonderful ideas of composing, where he'd been influenced by birds and did extensions of original compositions by incorporating sounds of birds that he had in the house. His wife had several birds, so another connection there. So we could go downstairs if you'd like.
Great, let's go.